We are joined now on the hotline by Jonathan O'Connell, who is a reporter focused on investigations for the Washington Post. And Jonathan, I must say, as I introduce you, it is so nice to do that and then not talk about Dan Snyder, because any investigative reporter that I've had from the Post for 3 years, I've had to go down that rabbit hole. But no, we get to talk about something that is not Dan Snyder. So welcome to the show with that probably terrible introduction.
Hey, thank you very much. I liked it.
All right, excellent. So you and some of your colleagues at the Post were able to, I guess, talk with Ted Leonsis and Muriel Bowswer today. Bowser is going to address the press shortly at Capital One Arena. But ultimately, what is the crux of what was agreed to today, and what background can you give us of how we went from Ted Leonsis talking with or doing an event in Potomac Yards with Glenn Youngkin to today, where he and Bowser announced they are staying in the district until 2050?
Yeah, I think an important part of this is, when Ted agreed to go to Virginia and announced he was going, he and the mayor stayed in touch. He still has teams that were still playing here. He has relationships in the city, and they just, they just kept talking. And, he was very focused on getting the Virginia chance to work, but obviously it just really went very poorly in Virginia. The reaction from fans was, I think, a lot more negative than he was ever expecting, and he has said as much. Once things really kind of turned really sour in Virginia, the mayor and Ted sort of started actually talking about what it would look like if he came back. And, part of this is money, obviously. And the city has put up, $515 million. That's her plan to help rebuild Capital One, expand it, modernize it, really turn it into the sort of the future for fan experience, in Ted's words. But on top of that, she has made a number of other concessions and changes that don't cost the city money necessarily, but that could really help Ted feel comfortable growing his teams and keeping them in the city.
So can you walk us through what those concessions are, and especially when it comes to the Southeast, the control of the land in Southeast Entertainment Sports Arena and the surrounding land, like what that actually means and what Ted can do with that land now that he couldn't before?
Yeah. So obviously still some of the stuff is being worked out. I mean, as of 10 minutes ago, they have not actually signed their term sheet. When they both spoke with me, they said they're in agreement on it and would be signing any minute. So I'm not expecting it won't be signed. The Southeast Arena, obviously right now it's the home court for the Mystics and the Go-Go, and it's the practice facility for the Wizards. I don't think anyone would disagree with the idea that it's been a tough stretch for that neighborhood during the pandemic, and that has been a source of contention with the city sometimes. How much are they doing? What are they doing to protect players and fans coming in and out of there? What are they doing to program that arena so that there are more events in there than just Ted's events? I think Ted's going to have a chance here to program that arena, first of all. So, if he wants to bring concerts that don't fill up Cab One in there, I think he's going to probably have the chance to do that. Some of that is me reading between the lines. I think he already realizes that he wants another place for the Wizards to practice. I don't fully know his reasoning there, because they've only been there, I think, 5 years or so. But the mayor has agreed to look for future places for the Wizards to practice, either closer to his arena in downtown or maybe on U Street, RFK, these places where the city has other parcels. And then I also, Ted also talked today about, wanting to see if the Mystics could play downtown sometimes, which the mayor would be fine with. The Mystics do not fill even the smaller arena every night. But if they're in the playoffs and as women's sports become bigger and bigger and more popular, maybe they put playoff games and at Cap One, et cetera, that sort of thing. So I think some of those details are to be worked out, but they both have agreed to sort of look at that arena through a fresh set of eyes, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's such also a star wave going through women's college basketball right now. Who knows what the Mystics' attendance is like in a couple of years if,
sure.
Who knows, they're kind of entering a rebuilding phase, and you get Juju Watkins and all of a sudden it's like, hey, no, 10,000 people want to watch her on a regular basis. What do you do with that? So I think that's great for the Mystics, for Monumental, and ultimately for the city as well. Jonathan O'Connell is our guest. He's an investigative reporter with the Washington Post who's been covering this deal between Ted Leonsis and Muriel Bowswer, Monumental Sports staying in the district. So you actually were the one having that conversation. What ultimately you walk out of the room, you're like, wow, okay, that just happened. We've all had those moments as reporters. what's the thing that immediately like sticks out to you as the main like thing you'll remember from the conversation?
I think back a little bit to when Ted decided to go to Virginia, and the day before that, the mayor had made her kind of final last-ditch pitch to him. And when he told her he was leaving, there was disappointment on the mayor's side, obviously, but it wasn't like anger. And even when he was negotiating with the governor and talking about how much he loved Virginia and wanted to be in Virginia the last 3 months, you really didn't see her take any shots at him. And a lot of people did take shots at him, obviously. Washington Post columnists, fans, lots of people. And I just, watching that, you could sort of see that she had left the door open for the possibility that he would come back. Like in speaking with both of them today, they're very complimentary of each other. They're playing nice right now, of course. But I think really fundamentally their interests mostly align downtown. Ted has been sort of wanting the last few years. He wants it to be safer downtown. He wants to be cleaner downtown. He wants fans to have a good experience coming in and out. A lot of those things really already dovetail with what the mayor wants downtown. She's been working to try to get crime cleaned up downtown. She wants people to feel very comfortable coming in and out. She doesn't want vacancy in retail and restaurants around there, and neither does he. So a lot of their interests really are overlapping. And, I think once they kind of agreed on the money, the other things are pretty easy for the two of them to agree on.
So what are some of the details of this look like as far as we know? And that could be like upgrades to the arena that we know that are a priority. It could be like how Ted and the city work together, Monumental and the city work together to solve some of the problems that you just mentioned. Like how much of this is still in the idea phase? Like we would like to get this done versus flushed out, or there are plans that exist from one or both of these sides?
It's a great question. Some of it is TBD. I think the dollar figure is probably going to stick at $515 million. He's agreed to extend his lease to 2050, so another 25 years. Some of the other things they've sort of agreed to work on together. For instance, like Ted has been wanting to close F Street south of the arena to cars so he can have that be sort of like a fan plaza more and more. And the mayor's agreed to try to get it to be like so he could close it for 2 hours before games, all games, and have an extended fan experience outdoors, especially when it's nice out. The Gallery Place shopping plaza right behind the arena that has fallen mostly vacant, that has a movie theater in there and used to have a bowling alley and has now got a lot of emptiness. The plan here and the details of this that we don't know yet are that he will be taking over that space and allowed to expand his footprint there. That's not owned by the city, but the city can certainly play a role in helping him acquire it and program it. A police presence is going to be a part of this. Thankfully, knock on wood, the crime statistics so far for this year are down from last year, and everybody's happy about that. But, Ted has talked about today about wanting a minimum number of police officers, not around his arena directly, but just in downtown, which benefits him and his fans, of course, and his employees. So a lot of this is TBD, but I think the fundamentals, $515 million, 25 years, a commitment to work on a lot of these things in terms of like bringing the downtown back. I think those parts are those are sort of to me the legs of the stool, so to speak.
Gotcha. Jonathan O'Connell, reporter focusing on investigations for the Washington Post, our guest here on the Hoffman Show. I'm going to put on my DC resident civics pain in the ass hat, Jonathan. So I'm sorry you're going to be on the receiving end of this question, but I'm going to speak up, I think, for a lot of people here, just as a matter of asking the question. I do certainly agree with part of this, but I'm going to put it in the most blunt terms possible. Ideas are great, especially from people in power. That's a start, but often they're spewed as just that. They are ideas that remain as ideals and not actual action plans. And to give a billionaire $515 million in a city that has a lot of needs, it definitely gives me nerves, and I think gives a lot of people nerves. And so I guess the question I would then ask off of that premise is, whose responsibility is it ultimately to follow through on this? Like if you are a DC resident and you have concerns that all this stuff sounds great, but how does it actually get done? Who is it that is going to be held to account here?
It's a great question. And I actually think, when the mayor and Ted were negotiating the first time around before the Virginia announcement, I think a lot of the mayor's calculation was, well, like, how much money are we really going to offer to a billionaire sports owner at a time when the city does have a lot of needs? Because this is going to be borrowed money, but it could be money they could borrow for something else. They could borrow it for building other things or other priorities, and instead they're going to borrow it for this team owner. And the interesting thing for her, and I think what gives her a significant amount of cover now, is the outcry when he announced he was leaving from district residents, district business owners, members of the city council. But, all unanimously, the city council members all agreed to sign on and offer him the $550 million in like a day at the time, or the $500 million in a day when he announced he was leaving. I think that gives her some cover to say, like, listen, there was a massive outcry. People obviously criticized her for allowing the teams to leave and what she had, her role in the business climate, her role in crime, et cetera. So I think it gives her some cover here. It's still, offering an enormous amount of money to a company that makes a lot of money and is run by a billionaire. And in terms of the following, the next steps here and following through, the DC Council is going to be asked to, the mayor's going to put the first tranche of money into her budget. The DC Council is going to be asked to approve it at the same time. They have an enormous budget gap that they're facing, potentially between $500 million and $1 billion. But if they get it through for the teams, then the way it would work is the work on the arena, the upgrading of the arena would happen basically on 3 subsequent off seasons. So his teams would still play from, fall through spring or early summer. Construction would happen in the interim, and then that would be repeated 3 times. Now that's kind of like a broad-based explanation of it, but that's the basic idea.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. So the arena stuff is on TED and Monumental once they have the money. The civic stuff is obviously on the city, and hopefully TED and it can help provide resources or platforms or stuff to make stuff happen. But this is why we vote, ultimately, is if Bowser and the city council doesn't get stuff done, then we replace him with someone else who hopefully can. Which leads me to my final question for you, Jonathan, which I'm now going to ask you to play complete political hack / analyst, depending on what people think of that profession, which is, I think you could make an argument on both the Virginia, frankly, and the D.C. side here, that this is government at its worst, that it's broken, that in the Virginia side, there's all this partisan bickering, and, this could have happened if it wasn't for Louise Lucas, really enjoying her kind of role as villain here. I could also make an argument, though, that this is politics working, and that, she was able to stand up for something that she didn't think was right and became a matter of principle, and that's actually what we want from our elected officials. Meanwhile, on the D.C. side, Bowser, while it seemed at the time like it was an unbelievable fumble by her, actually had an incredibly strong hand, and maybe she actually played that really, really well in the long term. As you look at it through that lens, I guess the question I would ask to wrap here is this government actually working to get this outcome, or is this government not working, ending in this outcome?
I mean, this is a really big, great overall question here, which is that municipal leaders and governors, mayors and governors across the country are faced with this same problem over and over and over again. A team owner, an owner of teams that their neighbors and community love, comes to them and says, I am going to leave if you don't pay for my stuff. If you don't pay for my stadium or my arena, I am going to leave, and it will be on you. And until Congress or some large, or there's going to have to be some federal change at some point that prevents those teams from doing that. Because if you look at the economics, the deal in Virginia where the government was going to put up, $1.2 billion in bonds for a team that was just going to move 3 miles, that doesn't make economic sense, despite what the governor's argument was. The independent people who analyze these deals know that they don't make economic sense to the communities that do them, and yet they do them over and over and over again because the governors and the mayors feel like they have no other option. And it is interesting that Ted came back to the mayor when he was pretty much out of options, and he is still getting $515 million at a time when the city needs money. So it would have to be a larger conversation that we have of the country, in my view, whether it's Congress or the federal government in some way, deciding that they are not going to allow sports teams to do this. It's not blackmail, but it is really forcing the hand of mayors and governors to pay for their facilities.
it's a huge conversation, and I think that it would be really fun to circle back on this at some point at a later date on kind of what that legislation would look like at the federal level. And if you're up for that conversation, we'd certainly have you back. But in the meantime, we really appreciate your work on this as a reader for me, but also for joining the show, man. This was really great, really insightful, and I know it's been a busy day, so thank you for your time.
Hey, it's a really good conversation. You really thought through things, and I appreciate it.
I try my best, Jonathan. I try my best. Thank you. That is Jonathan O'Connell with us here on The Hoffman Show. He is the lead reporter. I actually had the conversation with Bowswer and Leonsis about this story. Leonsis and Bowswer are speaking now. We'll try to bring you a clip or two of that as we wrap up the show next.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's The Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.